The alarms had not yet sounded when the first tremor moved through the submarine, a low and resonant vibration that seemed less like an impact and more like the ocean itself drawing breath. The crew of the Acheron had been drifting beneath the Antarctic pack ice for 3 silent hours, instruments active but lights dimmed, searching for the source of an anomalous thermal bloom that had appeared on satellite scans days earlier. It was supposed to be a simple reconnaissance mission, a slow descent into a frozen trench where nothing living should have been able to survive. Yet from the first moment the vessel slipped beneath the white ceiling of ice, the waters had felt heavier, as if hiding something old enough to resent the intrusion. That first vibration rippled through metal and bone alike, leaving the crew exchanging uncertain glances in the muted red glow of the control room, the hum of machinery suddenly feeling too loud in the quiet that followed. A quiet so dense it felt almost intentional, as though the dark sea pressing against the hull were waiting for something. Another tremor followed, softer this time yet unmistakably deliberate, brushing along the starboard side like a hand dragging across the submarine's metal skin. The captain ordered a full sensor sweep, but the sonar returned only empty static, a blankness that should have been impossible in a region where even drifting ice or distant currents left faint acoustic signatures. The emptiness was almost worse than a threat, because it meant something was there and concealing itself. As the Acheron continued forward, the corridor lights flickered, not from any electrical fault, but from a momentary disruption in power flow, the kind that occurs when energy is siphoned or absorbed, and one of the engineers whispered that the ocean felt charged, as though it were holding an unseen storm. The crew moved with increasing caution, each minute stretching into something slow and oppressive, until even small creaks of expanding metal sounded like warning signals from the deep. Midway through their descent, something scraped the hull. Not violently, not enough to breach or deform it, but with a long, slow pressure that suggested mass and intention. It was neither the jagged edge of ice nor the drifting body of any known creature. The contact lasted 7 seconds, though to the crew it seemed endless, like the passing of an immense shape gliding parallel to them with unhurried confidence. The sound of it echoed through the narrow corridors, a deep resonance that vibrated through the soles of their boots. The captain demanded visual verification, but the exterior cameras captured only darkness, a void interrupted by the faintest distortion, like a shadow moving within a shadow, too close for comfort and far too large to comprehend. By then, unease had spread through the submarine like leaking cold, and in that moment of swelling dread, a quiet thought drifted through the mind of every crew member. Something down here knows we are not supposed to be here. The vessel steadied, but the captain ordered a temporary halt, allowing the crew to gather their bearings. In the subdued stillness that followed, some of them whispered theories: an undiscovered whale species, a lost hulk of ice, a sonar glitch amplified by underwater pressure. But none of these reassurances held weight. Experienced sailors could feel when the ocean behaved strangely, and this was something more, something older. As the submarine hovered motionless, lights dimmed further to avoid attracting attention, another question began simmering quietly in the cabin air, almost superstitious in its hesitance. What if the shape beneath them wasn't a creature at all, but the remains of something unnatural, resting deep in the trench, awakened by their presence? Before the tension grew too thick to breathe, the narrator's voice, the one meant for listeners above water, for those who would eventually hear this account, would normally soften. But here the atmosphere only darkened, and even you, watching or listening from the safety of your room, are being drawn closer to the cold heartbeat of the Antarctic deep. And while we descend further into this unfolding mystery, tell me in the comments, from where in the world are you watching this video? The crew of the Acheron could have used a reminder that other eyes were out there, far from the crushing blackness they now faced, and your answer becomes a brief spark in the darkness surrounding them. Another tremor vibrated through the submarine before anyone could settle their nerves. This time it came from below, a slow, upward push that lifted the vessel by a few centimeters before releasing it. Every console flickered for a moment, as a low-frequency sound pulsed upward, too deep to be heard yet felt through the ribcage, a sound that seemed less like a call and more like an acknowledgement. The helmsman tried adjusting depth, but the controls resisted, as though the water thickened around them, pulling them gently toward the trench. Panic did not break out, but it coiled in the air, restrained only by discipline and the hope that logic still applied in these waters. The captain steadied his voice, ordering a reverse thrust, yet even at full power, the submarine inched backward as if pushing against an unseen force. It was then that the first deformation appeared on the hull sensors. An irregular series of impressions forming along the port side, shallow but distinct, as though something had pressed against the vessel's surface and left a pattern. The scans showed elongated shapes, almost like ridges or segmented protrusions, but impossible to define. The engineer insisted no known marine life could produce marks like that, especially not at this depth or in these temperatures. The crew exchanged silent looks, each of them understanding that whatever lingered outside was beginning to make itself known. A decision hovered in the captain's eyes: ascend or continue, but the anomaly they had come to investigate lay only a short distance ahead, and turning back now would mean abandoning the unknown to another crew, another vessel, another attempt. The submarine rolled slightly, as if brushed again by something massive but patient. The pressure monitors jumped for a moment, not dangerously, but enough to show the presence of a colossal displacement nearby, moving with extraordinary control. The sonar still showed nothing at all. A void so absolute that even the Acheron's noise seemed swallowed before it could travel. Whatever accompanied them understood sonar, it understood light, it understood proximity, and it moved with an intelligence that made the hairs on the back of the crew's necks lift in cold recognition. As the Acheron pushed deeper into the trench, the water darkened into a shade no human eyes had ever witnessed, a depth where light could not survive, and where the Earth's oldest secrets rested, waiting. The hull marks grew more numerous, faint but intentional, like fingerprints left by something testing the vessel, something curious, yet utterly inhuman. You can feel the pressure too now, can't you? Even from afar. The sense that something ancient has begun noticing the intrusion. And before we continue deeper into this abyssal encounter, let this whisper reach you through the dark. If stories like this pull you into their shadows, drift closer and subscribe to the channel, so you never miss what waits beneath the next layer of darkness. The descent into the trench tightened around the Acheron like a closing fist, the walls of the abyss rising on either side as the submarine's lights carved thin, trembling pathways through the black. The crew watched the monitors in tense silence, each passing meter amplifying the sense that they were no longer navigating a natural formation, but entering a territory shaped by something vast and deliberate. The water temperature dropped sharply, far faster than environmental models predicted, forming jagged thermal gradients that shimmered like invisible blades slicing through the gloom. Every instrument struggled to compensate, and a thin sheen of frost formed along the inner edges of several observation ports, as though the cold were reaching inward with curious fingers. The helmsman murmured that they should not be feeling this much thermal variance at such depth, his voice quieter than the hum of the engine, but no one dared suggest turning back now. The tension had become a presence of its own, clinging to skin and metal alike. Then the lights dimmed again, just briefly, yet enough to send a shiver crawling through the vessel. When they flickered back to full strength, a distortion appeared on the forward camera. At first it seemed to be a drifting pocket of sediment, a cloud of particulates disturbed by the submarine's movement. But as it swirled and tightened, its edges formed patterns too symmetrical to be random, almost like an outline, almost like something pacing them in the water just beyond reach. It hovered there for a moment before dissolving into the dark, and the crew stared at the screens in frozen disbelief, unsure whether the image was a malfunction or a revelation. The captain instructed the technicians to run a full diagnostic, but everything read normal, perfectly normal in a place where normalcy had already begun to rot. The trench walls narrowed further, their rocky surfaces fading into forms that resembled ribs pressed inward by the weight of time. Shadows clung to crevices in unnatural stillness, unaffected by the submarine's movement or the flow of current. The deeper they went, the more the terrain shifted from geological to something almost anatomical, carved with angles too precise and curves too deliberate, as if shaped by hands or forces that had once known purpose. Pressure monitors pulsed higher in steady increments, but not enough to indicate danger, just enough to remind them that they were entering a region shaped for something other than human exploration. The sonar, still giving nothing but void, seemed almost mocking now, a blank screen that reflected the crew's growing dread more than the environment outside. A sudden thud struck the hull, not glancing, not sliding. This time the impact hit with intention, as though something had tested its own strength against the submarine's armor. Conversations died instantly. The overhead pipes rattled, a shudder running the length of the vessel like a convulsion. The captain called for silence, listening intently, and for a moment, nothing followed. Then came a second impact, softer but more precise, occurring directly above the engine compartment. A scraping sound followed, slow and rhythmic, almost like counting. The engineer swore under his breath, running sensor diagnostics, but the monitors still showed only the impossible void. Whatever moved outside them was either absorbing the sonar waves or bending them in ways no known creature should be capable of. Something that did not want to be seen yet had no fear of being heard. The crew exchanged uneasy glances as another set of impressions formed along the hull, deeper than before. The patterns no longer resembled random ridges, but something more structured, almost architectural in shape. Overlapping arcs, elongated grooves, and singular indentations spaced with maddening precision. One technician noted that the spacing resembled the width of massive jointed limbs, like the imprint of an armored appendage. Another pointed out that the marks aligned in ways that suggested the creature, if creature it was, had moved with purpose, perhaps circling them or mapping their dimensions. Nobody wanted to consider the implication that something down here was studying them, understanding their shape, assessing their defenses. As the submarine pushed deeper, the trench floor finally came into view, illuminated by the pallid sweep of the external lights. What they saw first was sediment, fine and pale as bone dust, swirling gently in the slow-moving currents. But beneath that, carved into the seabed, were shapes no natural process could have formed. Concentric rings, some collapsed by centuries of pressure, others sharp and intact, spiraled outward like the remnants of structures long buried. Faint ridges extended between them, forming pathways that looked smooth despite the crushing weight of the depths. It resembled the skeletal remains of a colossal settlement, or perhaps the foundation of something older, something constructed long before the ice above had formed, long before humans had drawn their first breath. The helmsman whispered that the patterns looked almost ceremonial, but his voice cracked before he finished the thought. The lights flickered once more as the submarine drifted over the spirals, and for the first time, the cameras captured movement, real movement. Far below, a shadow detached itself from the edge of one of the circular formations, rising slowly, almost lazily, as though woken from a long slumber. The shape was immense, elongating as it ascended, its edges shimmering as if the water itself bent around it. No eyes were visible, no recognizable anatomy, yet its presence radiated awareness. A deep, resonant pulse rolled through the water, striking the submarine like a distant heartbeat. The crew clutched at their consoles, some gasping from the vibration that hummed through their bones. It was not a call, it was acknowledgement. The figure did not approach fully. Instead, it drifted alongside the trench wall, its form warping the darkness into impossible geometries. The water around it seemed to distort, compressing and expanding in rhythmic waves that pushed sediment into spirals mimicking the ancient patterns below. The creature, or entity, moved with an intelligence that felt alien yet deliberate, its trajectory never random. It was observing them, mirroring their movement with patient curiosity. The hull recorded another set of marks, deeper this time, as though an appendage had pressed against the submarine while the main body remained at a distance. This contact was not hostile. It felt like examination, a tactile recognition of something unfamiliar invading its domain. A murmur spread through the crew as lights dimmed yet again, But the captain forced their focus back to the instruments, demanding composure even as fear gnawed at his own voice. The trench's geometry grew stranger still as they progressed. The rings gave way to towering monoliths of stone, or something like stone, arranged in lines that seemed to pulse with faint luminescence when the submarine passed. The glow faded each time they tried recording it, leaving nothing but dark, featureless rock captured in the camera feeds. Some of the crew whispered theories: ancient civilization, geological anomaly, megafauna nesting ground. But each explanation crumbled under the enormity of what they were witnessing. A sudden lurch dragged the submarine downward, not violently, but with irresistible force, as though something below had extended a limb or tendril to pull them closer to the seabed structures. The hull groaned under the shift, and for a moment panic clawed at the crew's composure. The engines roared to counter the pull, but the downward drag continued for several agonizing seconds before abruptly releasing them. The sudden freedom sent the submarine drifting upward slightly, and in that disorienting moment, the cameras captured a glimpse of something emerging from beneath the sediment. Something massive, something layered, something that should not have been able to move. A deep tremor rolled through the trench, not caused by seismic activity, but by the shifting of something alive. The spirals in the seabed seemed to tremble in response, glowing faintly along their edges before the light faded once more. The creature, or creatures, because now it seemed impossible that the massive form was singular, moved within the shadows with slow grace, their presence turning the waters dense and suffocating. The crew realized with chilling clarity that these were not animals in the traditional sense. They were something older, something integral to the architecture of the trench itself, something that had shaped the environment as much as the environment shaped them. As the submarine steadied itself, the captain whispered the words none of them wanted to hear. "We are not alone down here, and they do not want us leaving yet. Before we push deeper into this living abyss, let the echo of this descent reach you above the waves. If the dark mysteries of the deep call to you as they do to us in this vessel of steel and fear, let your presence be known by subscribing to the channel, so the next descent does not find you unprepared for what waits beneath." The Acheron drifted deeper into the trench, its lights cutting trembling lanes through a darkness so complete it felt sentient. The engines hummed with strained determination, every bolt and panel vibrating under the weight of the pressure outside. Yet the true heaviness came not from the ocean, but from the awareness that something immense moved with them, not chasing, not fleeing, accompanying. The crew no longer asked whether the presence was singular. The shifting shadows and intermittent pulses of displaced water made it clear that more than one entity lingered just beyond visibility, gliding through the void with the patient synchrony of predators who had never known fear. The hull trembled again, not from impact but from proximity, as if each of the beings released a resonance that the metal could not help but echo. The deeper they went, the more the trench changed in ways that defied geological explanation. The stone formations rose higher, forming archways and columns that twisted upon themselves like frozen spirals of smoke. Their surfaces shimmered faintly, as if coated in a film of bioluminescent residue, not bright enough to illuminate anything fully, but enough to reveal immense shapes sliding past at the edges of perception. Some moved vertically, scaling the walls of the abyss with slow, undulating movements. Others drifted horizontally, long silhouettes gliding through the dark like drifting fragments of night. At one point, a shape passed so close to the portside camera that its outline overwhelmed the screen, its surface textured with ridges that matched the marks now etched across the submarine's hull. It was as though the creature had pressed against them earlier, not out of aggression, but out of recognition, as if identifying something familiar in the metal or the energy that fueled it. The air inside the vessel grew heavier, saturated with an unspoken dread. The crew monitored the oxygen levels, aware that psychological strain alone could make breathing feel difficult, yet the readings remained normal. Still, each inhalation felt shallow, as if the pressure outside squeezed their lungs through the hull. Whispers began in the lower deck, claims that faint sounds were being picked up not by sonar, but by the metal itself, vibrations crawling through the structure like distant voices. No one wanted to believe it, but the engineer admitted he had heard it too, an irregular pattern of pulses moving through the hull like coded tapping. Not random, not mechanical, communicative. The captain ordered the engines reduced to a silent drift to minimize noise, hoping to avoid provoking whatever surrounded them. For a moment, the trench felt motionless, as though the entire ocean were holding its breath. Then, as if responding to the change, a faint luminescence ignited far below, forming spirals that echoed the patterns carved into the seabed. The glowing rings spread outward, activated by some unseen trigger, each one pulsing with a slow, rhythmic heartbeat that resonated through the water. The crew stared in speechless awe and rising terror. These patterns were not natural. They were signals, invitations, or warnings. The submarine passed above one of the glowing spirals, and the cameras captured a shape rising directly from its center. Unlike the others, which drifted like amorphous shadows, this one emerged with haunting clarity. Its form was elongated and sinuous, clad in layered structures resembling ancient armor plates fused by pressure and time. Each plate bore grooves identical to those imprinted along the hull. The being rose with deliberate slowness, its presence warping the water around it in subtle waves that made the lights flicker. When it leveled with the submarine, it halted, hovering motionless in the water like a sentinel. It did not strike. It merely watched. A low-frequency vibration passed through the vessel, deeper and more resonant than any before. It made the lights dim and several monitors glitch with static. The engineer shouted that power levels were being drawn away, not failing but diverted, as though something outside were siphoning energy directly through the hull. The captain demanded emergency protocols, but before any action could be taken, the submarine jerked sideways, not violently, but firmly. As if pushed, the external cameras revealed the cause. One of the entities, perhaps the same sentinel-like being, had extended a long segmented appendage, pressing gently against the hull. It guided the submarine along a specific path, steering them toward a descending corridor between two massive stone structures. The gesture was disturbingly careful, almost protective, but devoid of anything that resembled kindness. It felt more like a shepherd guiding something fragile through its territory, neither hostile nor welcoming, merely ensuring compliance. The crew was torn between resisting and surrendering to the direction of the creature. The captain tried diverting course, yet every attempt was met with subtle correction. The pull of water, the pressure of a gentle but irresistible push, even electrical interference that momentarily disabled controls. It became evident that the Acheron was not in command of its own trajectory. They were being taken somewhere. As the submarine drifted down the corridor, faint structures emerged from the dark. Massive pillars carved with intricate, repeating patterns that mirrored the grooves on the creatures' bodies. The pillars rose in spiraling formations, curving inward like ribs guarding a heart of stone. At their center lay an open space, circular and impossibly vast, with the seafloor forming a smooth basin, untouched by sediment. The glowing rings pulsed more intensely here, their rhythm slower and more profound, each beat sending a ripple through the water that brushed the submarine like a breath. The sentinel entity drifted ahead of them, its silhouette blending with the spiraling architecture until it appeared almost sculptural, a living extension of the ancient structure. The realization struck the captain and crew simultaneously. The trench was not merely a habitat, it was a colossal temple, a sanctuary carved by time and by the beings who still haunted it. The spirals were not random formations, they were language, ritual, memory. A sudden flash of movement shattered the stillness. One of the larger shadows, previously gliding in the periphery, darted forward with startling speed, its mass creating a shockwave that struck the hull. The submarine rocked violently, alarms blaring for the first time since the descent began. The creature collided with the stone pillars, releasing a burst of pale luminescence that rippled across its armored surface. Was it attacked? Startled? challenging the Sentinel? The answer came too quickly. The Sentinel responded. Its elongated form expanded, plates shifting with a grinding resonance as it released a pulse of deep sound that shook the trench. The attacking shadow recoiled, its shape fragmenting into wisps of darkness before retreating into the abyss. The pulse reverberated through the architecture, causing ancient carvings to glow faintly, illuminating the basin in pale, trembling light. The Sentinel then turned its focus back toward the submarine, the glow reflecting off its featureless surface in a way that felt dreadfully intentional. Another vibration passed through the water, this one softer, almost inquisitive. The submarine drifted closer to the basin, pulled by forces no human technology could counter. The crew watched in paralyzed silence as the smooth seafloor began to shift, circles opening like ancient doors, revealing a depth beyond depth, a well of darkness that seemed to swallow the light entirely. The basin was not the destination. It was an entrance, a gateway. The pressure outside rose sharply as if the trench itself leaned inward. Instruments beeped warnings. The lights flickered violently. The crew braced themselves, but there was no impact, only a slow tilt forward as the submarine was drawn toward the opening. Something moved below the gateway, something larger than everything they had seen so far. A shadow older than the ice above, older than the sea. Before the descent into that impossible abyss continues, let this moment linger like the echo of a pulse through the deep. If the unfolding darkness grips you, if the unknown below stirs your curiosity as it does ours, let your presence drift closer and subscribe, so you do not lose your way in the depths where light dies. The gateway yawned beneath the Acheron, like the mouth of a world that had slept beneath the ocean since before the first continents drifted apart. The basin's circular plates continued to shift and retract, revealing tier after tier of descending rings that pulsed faintly with the same rhythm as the Sentinel's resonant calls. Each pulse made the submarine tremble, not from force, but from a kind of harmonic recognition, as if the metal hull were being tuned to the frequency of the abyss below. The captain shouted for the engines to push upward, to counter the pull, but the commands came too late. The downward current surged with quiet authority, pulling them toward the opening with a smooth inevitability that made resistance feel almost sacrilegious. The crew clutched their restraints, watching in stunned silence as the last of the stone plates slid aside, revealing the black expanse into which they were about to descend. As the submarine crossed the threshold, something remarkable happened. The water grew warmer, not subtly, but dramatically, as though they had entered the exhaled breath of something colossal, sleeping far below. Condensation formed on the interior walls of the vessel, a thin mist rising from the consoles as the temperature climbed far beyond what any Antarctic trench should allow. The engineer swore softly, baffled by the environmental readings, but the warmth felt less like a natural thermal vent and more like an atmosphere shaped by intention. The light steadied for the first time in hours, glowing without flicker, as though whatever influence had disrupted them above had no dominion here. It was as if the gateway sealed behind them, enclosing them within a pocket of the ocean carved out by ancient design. The darkness ahead was not empty. Slowly, as the submarine continued its involuntary descent, faint luminescent threads appeared in the water. Thin, drifting strands of pale blue light that curled and twisted like living filaments. They moved with purpose, weaving through the water, spiraling around the submarine without touching it, forming intricate patterns that mirrored the carvings above. The crew watched in mesmerized terror as more of the threads converged, intertwining into vast, flowing curtains of light that revealed the sheer size of the chamber they had entered. The space was immense, far larger than the trench above suggested, an underground cathedral of water and stone illuminated by these drifting living glyphs. The Sentinel followed them into the chamber. Its elongated shape glided through the glowing filaments, scattering them into delicate spirals that reformed in its wake. But something else moved too, something larger, deeper in the chamber. A vibration rolled up from below, so profound it made the entire submarine shiver. The crew clutched the armrests, eyes fixed on the viewports as the darkness shifted. An outline emerged far beneath them, so vast and indistinct that at first it looked like a rising landmass. But land did not move with such slow, deliberate coherence. Land did not exhale. A faint glow pulsed from the colossal shape, revealing its curvature, layered, ancient, and impossibly organic. It was as though a mountain of living armor lay coiled beneath the chamber. The pulse spread outward, awakening the luminescent strands, which tightened into spiraling patterns that converged toward the creature's form. The sentinel lowered itself in the water, plates folding slightly, as if in reverence. The crew understood without words. This being was older, greater, the architect of the structures above, or perhaps the guardian of something even more ancient. The creature shifted. Sediment rose in dark clouds as sections of its armored mass unfurled like petals of a stone flower. It did not rise fully, only enough to reveal a portion of its true scale, a scale so immense that the Acheron looked insignificant beside it. The water pressure trembled but did not crush the submarine, suggesting an unseen barrier or influence was protecting them, holding the ocean's crushing weight at bay. The engineer whispered that the pressure outside did not match the depth. It was impossible, but the readings confirmed it. The rules of the natural world bent around this chamber, shaped by forces that predated human understanding. Then came the sound, not an impact, not a vibration, a voice. Low frequency, resonant, and impossibly vast, it flowed through the water and into the hull, into the bones of every crew member. It was not speech as humans understood it. It was resonance, shaped like memory. Images flickered across the monitors. Static at first, then clearer, as though the submarine's sensors were being hijacked. Ancient landscapes appeared. Continents unrecognizable. Skies filled with storms of luminous particles. Vast oceans teemed with shapes similar to the Sentinel, but larger, more numerous, forming spirals in ceremonial movements across the seafloor. A collective gasp passed through the crew when the next image came. A mass of these beings constructing something beneath the forming ice sheets, carving spirals, building monoliths, weaving networks of luminescent strands that pulsed like living circuitry. The images grew sharper, showing the colossal being, the one now partially risen before them, overseeing the construction, its movements deliberate and graceful, its presence radiating authority. The spirals weren't decorative. They were anchors, signals, interfaces between the living and the material, a system designed to communicate across epochs. Then came the final image, a world-changing cataclysm, ice expanding rapidly, crushing ecosystems, consuming oceans. The ancient beings retreated into the trench, spiraling downward toward the chamber they now inhabited. The colossal one curled around the central basin, as if entering a long, millennial slumber. The sentinel stood guard above, waiting for a time when the ice would thin, and the world above would unknowingly send explorers back into their domain. The images vanished abruptly, leaving only the humming resonance. The crew could barely breathe. The captain steadied himself, gripping the console tightly as he tried to make sense of what they had witnessed. The colossal being lowered itself again, settling back into the sediment as the luminescent strands broke apart and drifted through the chamber like dust motes in eternal slow motion. The sentinel turned, gliding upward toward the gateway. The meaning was clear. They had been shown enough. They were being dismissed, allowed to leave. For now. The submarine began to rise, not by its own power. Controls remained unresponsive, but by the gentle, upward pull of unseen currents. The chamber dimmed behind them as the luminescent strands dispersed. The gateway sealed above, stone plates sliding into place with silent precision. The ascent through the trench felt dreamlike, unreal, as the darkness thickened once more and the pressure monitors returned to their natural readings. The marks remained etched deeply along the hull, undeniable evidence of the encounter. Yet the sonar, the cameras, the thermal scans, Everything reset to normal, as if the abyss itself wished to erase its own secrets. When the submarine finally neared the lighter waters beneath the Antarctic ice, the controls returned all at once, jolting the crew with their sudden responsiveness. The captain seized the helm, guiding the vessel upward with trembling hands. No one spoke. No one dared break the fragile barrier between what they had witnessed and the safety of the world above. But as the Acheron breached the surface, the first rays of pale Antarctic daylight reflecting off the ice, the crew felt something subtle but unmistakable. An echo in their bones, a faint resonance like the memory of a distant call. The ancient beings were not gone, not vanished into the depths. They were awake now, stirring beneath the frozen continent, patient and observant, waiting for the world above to take its next intrusive step. And you, watching from the surface of this story, carry that echo now as well. If the depths called to you, if the ancient shadows beneath the Antarctic ice left their mark on your imagination as they did on the hull of the Acheron, let your presence be felt in the darkness. Like, subscribe, and leave your comment below. Your voice becomes another pulse in the deep, another flicker of light in the abyss where secrets older than time continue to wait.